Welcome everyone for today's workshop with Local First Arizona and our partners at Project Equity. We are really excited to be partnering together throughout the state of Arizona, working with businesses to raise awareness about the opportunity of employee ownership. We believe that this is a real opportunity to work with businesses throughout Arizona to get them to understand that there's multiple options that you have as you're potentially thinking in the coming years to transition your business. And so Project Equity is our experts in this area, and we're excited to have them with us today. So I'd like to give it over to Annie, who's going to lead us through today's session.
Yes. Oh, sorry. We're having some see. Okay, let me try to get the slides back up here. Okay. All right, great. Great. So thank you, Thomas, for that wonderful introduction. Super excited to be here today to present to you all on employee ownership and all of its great benefits that it can bring to you all and your businesses in Arizona. So before I get into the heart of the presentation, I just want to give a brief rundown of our agenda topics. So we will cover today's business environment. We will look at the definition and benefits of employee ownership. We will touch on the employee ownership models and provide you some examples of companies that have successfully transitioned. Courtney will walk you through the transition process and what that entails. And finally, we will wrap with the Q&A. So at Project Equity, we are a national nonprofit, and we're headquartered in the Bay Area of California. And we really specialize to help businesses transition to employee-owned entities. We support the financial deal structuring that's involved, and we develop the participatory culture that's very much needed in these types of transitions. We have several partnerships with municipalities and other like-minded organizations to help us do this work. And, we really see employee ownership as a way to keep businesses rooted in their local communities, as well as provide owners with a fair sale price and a really viable succession option for them as well. So initially at Project Equity, when we first started doing this work, we were focused on the silver tsunami crisis. And this is where droves of retiring baby boomer owners looking to retire were ultimately putting their businesses at risk of closure. And now, through a few years of navigating this COVID-19 pandemic, what we've come to understand is that employee ownership can really serve as a great worker retention, as well as a business recovery strategy. So a couple of facts I'd like to highlight that are very much affecting the business community right now, and you all may be experiencing this as well. So hiring and retaining employees is definitely a huge problem at the moment. So to put this slide into context, about 3% of the entire workforce quit their jobs back in August of 2021. So this equates to about 1 in 30 people quitting in just 1 month alone. Now, half of small businesses have unfilled jobs at the moment. So they don't have the people there to do the work that's required of them. So if you've heard about the Great Resignation, it's very much a real occurrence at the moment, unfortunately. So some recent facts about employee retention. So employee turnover has actually increased over the last 3 years. To replace a worker, this costs as much of 1/3 of their annual pay. And 94% of employees, so close to 100% here, would stay at their current employer if they invested in their professional development. So here it's just, some facts to mull over and think about when you're thinking about your business and your goals. Now, regarding Arizona, so we've done some research about the small business community here. So here are some of the findings for you. So essentially, more than 25,000 businesses in Arizona's major metropolitan areas of Phoenix, as well as Tucson, are over 20 years old in their operations. And these businesses employ over 2.6 million workers. So as you can see, employee ownership would be a great way to keep these businesses rooted locally. So selling a business, this is in reality often easier said than done. Only 20% of businesses that are put on the market to sell in reality actually do sell. And even less than that, so about 15% transition intergenerationally among families. And already 1 in 5 businesses are at risk of closing. So we see employee ownership as a way to identify buyers right under your nose who have oftentimes been there with you from the ground, helping you build the business from the ground up. So at Project Equity, we want you to understand all of your succession options. And you may be familiar with some of the traditional ones like selling to family, being acquired by an outside buyer. And while some of those can provide, a few benefits, we see employee ownership as ticking all of the right boxes. So preservation of legacy is achieved. An owner receives a market value price for their business. Tax benefits can be attained, and that all important staff retention as well. Okay, so this all sounds great, but essentially what is employee ownership? By definition, what is it? So employee ownership, first and foremost, it's a strategy. It's a strategy that can provide economic resiliency for its workers, and in many instances, pathways to prosperity for them. It can provide owners with a market rate return on their business, and it can provide communities with that all important job retention, worker retention, as well as the all important economic stability. Okay, so we've talked about the definition. Now, what are the benefits? So at Project Equity, we partnered with Hadaway Communications last year, and we did a survey over the summer. And we asked business owners, what are the business benefits of employee ownership that were most important to them? And in their responses, we had over 70% say that all of these items were somewhat or extremely important to them. So increasing profitability, motivating employees, receiving a fair price for their business, and having that capital, the business capital, to grow. So employee ownership, it creates strong businesses, but it also creates strong communities. Profit margins are 8.5% higher than in non-employee owned companies, and sales and employment rates grow at 2% faster per year. Fewer layoffs happen at employee-owned companies than in non-employee-owned ones. So again, really highlighting the importance of retention, worker retention. Employees part of employee-owned companies have better wages. So in this particular slide, you will see that cooperative employees earn $2 more per hour, and 53% higher incomes are attained among ESOP employees. And also, employee-owned companies tend to weather economic downturns better. They retain jobs at a 4-to-1 rate during the pandemic as well. So aside from all of these benefits, there are additional unique benefits of employee ownership. So we've talked about how owners can achieve a fair sell price for their business, but they can also craft and customize their own exit timeline. So that can be according to their goals and plans. And in addition to the company's legacy being preserved and the culture and the people, Also the relationships, so customer relationships, vendor relationships, those can remain intact as well through employee ownership. Okay, so we've talked about the benefits, we've defined employee ownership. Now let's look at some of the models of employee ownership. At Project Equity, we focus on what's called broad-based employee ownership. So really the opportunity for as many folks as possible to become employee owners. We cover employee stock ownership plans, also called ESOPs, worker cooperatives, and employee ownership trusts, also called EOTs for short. Now with employee stock ownership plans, these function primarily like 401k retirement plans, whereby a part of the shares or all of the shares of a company are transferred to a trust that is held for and on behalf of its employees. With worker cooperatives, these typically are 100% employee owned. They have democratic principles like profit sharing already built into the model. And the worker owners elect, and many of them often sit on the board of directors. With employee ownership trusts, these exist to keep the business going in perpetuity and for the benefit of its employees. They're really customizable and bespoke trust structures that can have democratic principles like profit sharing incorporated into them. At Project Equity, we offer one-to-one consults with business owners, and we discuss some readiness factors when they're considering employee ownership. And what we look at are, has the business been profitable? So has it been in good financial health for at least the most recent 5 years? And of course, we also factor in, the COVID-19 pandemic and how that could have affected them. We also look at, does the business have an experienced workforce? And with worker cooperatives and employee ownership trusts, we often recommend those models for companies that have at least 12 or more employees. For ESOPs, we tend to see these as a really good fit for companies that have at least 40 or more employees. And then finally, we look at, has the business been established in the community? Does it have a proven track record with years of experience? Okay, so I know, discussed a lot of things on employee ownership, but now I'd love to share with you all some examples of companies that have successfully transitioned to employee ownership. So we have Delta Pipeline, Inc. So this is a construction company based out of Long Beach, California. And they transitioned a few years back to an ESOP. I wanted to play for you all a short video from the owner, Craig Danley, where he talks about firsthand how the culture has improved as a result of becoming an ESOP.
If you're an owner and you do not have a succession plan yet, it's never too early to start. And to think that somebody's just going to buy what we created, you might get lucky, but it might go for a big discount, who knows, and then you're going to be working for somebody for a while. You get to be better, you get to grow. And it's not only about your retirement, it's about what happens to you while you're building a company, while you become an owner, and what it means to think that way. It changes the way that you actually interact with your colleagues, your family, your supervisors, your community. It's an incredible experience. Not easy, but well worth the effort. I'm passionate about how to make our world better. I'm passionate about how do we share what we've worked for. I can't take it with me. I can't take the knowledge with me. I can't take the experience with me. It's all going to end someday. Sooner than later, more than likely. And as a steward, it's my job to give it back.
All right. So in addition to Delta Pipeline, we also have another example of a worker cooperative. So this company, they're called Slice of New York, and they're a pizzeria, really popular in the Bay Area of California. And with this particular example, the company was able to distribute $500,000 of profits to its workforce in the first 2 years after becoming a worker cooperative. So really important to highlight the economic security that becoming a worker cooperative has provided for its workers. So to sum up all of the great advantages and benefits of employee ownership. So the owner can receive a market price for their business. Employee ownership can deliver significant tax advantages where the owner as well as the business can both benefit. The owner can control their exit timeline and adjust the process according to their goals, their plans, etc. Employee ownership supports flexible financing, and this is done through a leveraged buyout. And employee ownership strengthens local economies. So the new employee owners are able to asset build and to build their equity and keep that money circulated in the local economy. So with that, I'll go ahead and kick off the presentation to my colleague Courtney, who will walk you through the transition process.
Thanks, Annie. And hi, everyone. My name is Courtney Kemp. I am a client services manager at Project Equity. So I am on the team of folks that works directly with businesses who are either assessing this as an opportunity for their company if the selling owner or owners is looking to graduate to other things or retire, or with companies who have decided to go down this path and who are currently in the middle of transition. So I am really excited to speak to all of you today. If you have any questions or if anything comes up, please feel free to just put it in the chat and we'll address those at the end. And I'm sure we'll get Annie and Mai's information off to you all as well. So please feel free to reach out at any time. I think the first thing that I want to just cover before we dig into some slides is kind of the 3 areas that if you're thinking, is this the right fit, or if you're working with a client or businesses yourself that are maybe assessing this opportunity for them, the first thing we'll kind of ask when we're helping a client go through a feasibility analysis to assess this opportunity for them. We kind of split that into 3 areas. So the first area we think of is financial. The second area we think of is management. And the third area we think of is employees. And I think that sort of triad is an important thing to kind of anchor yourselves in and think about, on the one hand, do you have financial goals for your departure? Do you know what you want to sell the company for? On the second piece, do you have a strong succession plan? Is management in place and prepared for your departure? And then on the employee side, do you have a dedicated, experienced pool of employees ready to take on this challenge? So I just want to start with that framing. You can go ahead to the next slide, Annie. Thank you. So on that financial piece, how does this work? Like, if it is a good fit and you are interested in proceeding, how does this business sale actually take place? So, the first thing to think about, as Annie said, it is a leveraged buyout. And so at a certain point, there's going to be a sale price that's determined and different deal elements and terms that are finalized. The extent to which that is negotiated and exactly how that works is going to depend on the type of structure that you select. So Annie was talking about worker-owned cooperatives versus employee-owned trusts. And so the nuances are going to depend on your exact situation, but ultimately there's a sale price and deal terms. The paperwork is signed, and what's going to happen is that the shares of the company are going to be sold to a new entity. Typically, sometimes the pre-existing entity just transitions into a new entity, but sometimes an entirely new entity is created that purchases the pre-existing business. And what that's going to do is create a new, let's call it a worker-owned cooperative, and assume that you or one of the people you're working with has determined that that's what they'd like to do. So we've got a new worker-owned cooperative. The business is proceeding as normal, but the selling owner has sold to a new group of what we call employee owners. And the way that they're going to pay off that sale is by taking out a loan from often a bank, and we'll get into that in a second. Anything that's gone through a bank is going to be an upfront payment to that selling owner or owners. And then oftentimes there's going to be an additional kind of piece of seller financing that would be part of that as well. But either way, however you structure the deal, those loans to the company are paid off over time to the selling owner or owners through the future cash flow of the company. So a really common misconception is that employee owners are paying the upfront capital to purchase the business themselves. And that's not the case. It's really the business that's providing the financing over time out of the profitability of the company. Go ahead, Annie. And to get more specific about that, here are some of the elements that I was starting to allude to. So in the middle, we've got the bank. And we work most closely with CDFIs, so community development financial institutions. And these folks, you don't have to go through someone like this if you want to pursue employee ownership. But sometimes it's worth doing it because these are more kind of friendly financing folks. They're more mission oriented. They understand this strategy more than a traditional bank might. So we have partners at Project Equity that we go through and can help with the access to financing piece, which is sometimes a concern for selling owners because they're concerned that maybe a traditional bank won't understand employee ownership. So, that piece is in place and we can help you through that. And there's a lot of opportunities for friendly financing, particularly if your workforce is low or moderate income or comprised greatly of people of color. And so oftentimes the bank is going to carry about 50 to 70% of the overall sale price. And then, as I said earlier, the rest of that sale price is usually carried by the selling owner or owners themselves. And so that's a little bit of skin in the game that the bank is going to want to see, because oftentimes these are not deals that require personal guarantees for any individual. And sometimes they don't even require collateral. It's the future cash flow of the company that will collateralize the deal. So they really want to see that skin in the game from the business owner themselves that says, yes, I totally believe my company is going to maintain profitability over a certain amount of time. And then there's this third piece on this slide, and it's not hugely material for the deal always, but it's labeled here as employee owners and employee buy-in. So what a buy-in is once you become a co-op, a worker-owned cooperative, the employees get to set a kind of buy-in price that allows them to become a member and start accruing all the benefits of employee ownership. So in order to get profit sharing, in order to vote in company governance, they're going to have kind of a nominal fee that they get to set themselves. And so in that first year of becoming a worker-owned cooperative, there might be an influx of cash that helps them get on their feet once they start to get this financing in place. And whether or not that's material really depends on the size of your company and the deal. But these are sort of the three elements that we think about in the financing. Go ahead, Annie, please. So, if you are interested in exploring this as an option, please do reach out. As I said, and as Annie has alluded to, we've got people on our team that help people do this all the time. She'll talk a little bit more about how to reach out, I think, at the end of the call. But we talk to people all the time. So don't hesitate if you have questions, even if you're in the really early stages. We work with people sometimes years before they truly transition. So it's really not a problem. You can keep clicking, Annie. Once you do kind of decide that you're pretty serious about it, you can engage with us to complete a feasibility study. And so that's when we would go and really do a deeper dive into the three elements that I mentioned during the beginning of my portion of the presentation. So that's when we're really going to look into the possible sale price and range of earnings you could expect into your succession planning and then into your employee pool. And that usually, the goal of that is to help you determine whether or not moving forward with the transition is the right step for you. If it is, then you would proceed with the transition, and that is going to help determine what exactly is the structure of the sale, what's the legal situation. You would design the co-op itself, and then at the end of that process, you'd emerge with a worker-owned cooperative and hopefully a happy selling owner and group of employees. And that's what this piece does here. When you close the sale, that's when we've got that new entity in place. We've got some legal documents that structure how the co-op is going to be governed, and some other deal structure elements in place. Then at Project Equity, we also have some post-transaction support programs. You can imagine in the first year of being a worker-owned cooperative, there might be questions that come up, or if you've not had a board before, now you have a board, maybe you need some assistance with that. If you haven't done regular profit sharing or bonus programs, you might need some help calculating that on an annual basis. They're just things that come up. And we have this program called Thrive that assists new worker-owned companies through getting their operational and governance practices in place, and just really kicking off this worker-owned cooperative. So, things that I've seen really help create a successful feasibility is that debt capacity piece. So what we do during the feasibility, to put a finer point on this, is conduct a debt capacity analysis to establish the viability of a sale. Is there enough profitability to support this? And to help give you a range of the earnings that you could expect as a selling owner through this type of sale. And so, that's usually a really key piece for selling owners, and people are more financially motivated than others at times. We've got different goals. And so what we do is understand your goals and then help you figure out if an employee ownership exit strategy can meet that from a financial perspective. The next is supporting that employee engagement. So as I said, that's really a key piece to moving forward with employee ownership. You've got to have employees who want to do this. And so we support that process of speaking to them. The third bullet there, understanding possible future management scenarios. That's really key. That's work you can start doing as early as you want, making sure you've got a solid management succession plan, because, worker-owned cooperatives are still companies, right? We don't want to take out management structures. We don't want to remove the things that have made the company successful to begin with. We want to make sure that just because you're transitioning to a worker-owned cooperative or other employee-owned model, that the business doesn't suffer as a result. And then we would help you, what we call here, develop a straw model of employee ownership. And really what that means is helping you understand the different co-op design elements, the different things that are going to be going on in a co-op, so that you can really start thinking about, is that a good fit for the people in my company, the type of company that we want to be. I'll pass it back to you, Annie.
Thank you, Courtney, for all of that thorough information on our process. So as Courtney mentioned, we love talking to business owners of all different sectors of businesses. I'm Annie Palacios. I do business engagement work. So I do a lot of the consults, and I'm happy to speak to any of you all who want to get in touch with us. We can talk more specifically about your individual needs and what your plans for the business are, and explore if employee ownership is a fit. And my contact information . We can provide that to you afterwards. A little bit of technical glitch.
We'll make sure to get it out for sure.
Thank you all so much. So Thomas, if you want to facilitate the Q&A first, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, thank you, Annie, and thank you, Courtney. Such really good information as to really ground us in what is this, and if you, I mean, if you have not pursued, finding out more information about the opportunity. We have one question that came in. Someone is asking, what do you find to be the key success factors for businesses that that transition this way and pursue this option for them?
Yeah, I can start with that, and then Courtney, if you want to fill in any additional points. But yeah, so the ones that really we highlighted. So a historical profitability of the business. Obviously COVID has hit many businesses hard, and we understand that. But if the business has shown profitability throughout the years, that is definitely a readiness factor, and would allow for a successful business transitioning. Years of operation. So really, that business being established in the community, and then a workforce that is stable with years of knowledge. So Courtney, do you want to add a little bit to that as well?
Yeah, I'm happy to. And if this person wants to add some color about exactly what stage they're thinking about, that might be helpful too. But things that came to mind for me, besides the financial piece, which is kind of just cut and dry. It's like there's a there or there's not, which is what we help you assess. And then if there is a there, we help you figure out, what does that actually look like? How does that break down into an estimated range of earnings? So that piece is a little more cut and dry. The other piece that I cannot stress enough is as early as planning as you can do on succession. It really is a major barrier to any type of transition where you want your company to maintain success over time. But especially for us, you can't just transition a company, give it to your employees, and not have the appropriate leadership structure in place to support whatever success, whatever profitability you've already got going on. So I can't stress that enough, that clear scoping of what the owner currently does, or if there's multiple owners, thoroughly scoping their roles and how they work together, identifying really what they do on paper and maybe less tangibly for the company, and figuring out a very clear way of closing that gap. That's a really big one. And then I think another less talked about one is company culture. It's a lot easier to move through a transition of this nature if you've already got a pretty open and transparent culture. We see employee ownership work for all sorts of companies, as Annie said. But if you do have a more traditional kind of closed door culture, it's just going to take a little longer to get employees up to speed, to build trust, to do all of the different changes that happen or that would need to happen to get employees to a place where they are prepared to steward the company over time. So none of those are bad things. It just might influence the timeline that it takes to do this work. And there are things that you can start sort of thinking about earlier rather than later that can really help once you are ready to move forward with something like this.
That's what I would add. Really helpful. Yeah, that's really helpful. Another question, Courtney, to your point regarding kind of the planning. Obviously every business is going to be a little different depending on your size and your industry and all of that. But as a business begins to consider this, what time frame should they realistically be looking at to potentially make this plan? Are we looking at 2 to 3 years, 5 years, 10 years ideal? What should businesses really be considering?
Really good question. Oftentimes I say to my clients all the time that it's a super annoying response that I say over and over, that it really depends on the company itself. To give you a ballpark, once you decide that you want to transition, I would plan on a year that it takes to transition through a process like ours. So that's once you've gone through a feasibility and you are okay with the estimated range of earnings. That's when you have a pool of employees that's ready to take this on. Maybe not completely like they're super gung-ho and they know everything about employee ownership. I mean, it's a process, but you've got a pool of people who are generally committed to learning more about this idea and digging into trying. And you've got a management succession plan. If not in place, then scoped and appropriately kind of, you've got a plan in place for hiring or anything that needs to happen. So I'd plan on a year for the transition piece once those elements are in place, and the amount of time it takes folks to get to that place of having employees, being okay with the sale price, which is based on company profitability largely, and having a succession plan. That really depends on where you are right now. And I know a lot of companies have just been, all sorts of things have happened because of COVID. So it might be a little bit longer of a build for some folks to get to that place. But it is key to the success of employee ownership. So if you want help assessing, where really do you need to be to make this work and how long might it take, that's really the time to do a feasibility.
Great, super helpful, thank you. We had another question come in saying this may have been answered already, but what do you see as the pros and cons of rolling out an employee-owned structure to a select 1 or 2 top employees to start, and over time eventually transition more employees to have the opportunity, rather than instead of opening it up to all employees at one time? Is there a difference? Is that even possible? Are there pros and cons to each?
Yeah, so there's some technical components to this. Thanks for the question. In order to just legally, no, you can't really offer the opportunity to a select few. The opportunity to be a member of a worker-owned cooperative must be extended to all of your employees. So that's the first piece to understand. But a more nuanced answer is that in order to become a worker owner, there are certain criteria that you have to meet. So you have to be eligible if you're employed by the company, but you also have to meet certain requirements, and that's called membership criteria. That criteria is something that's set during the design process by the people at the company themselves. So you know what it takes to steward your company, you know how long somebody needs to be on board before they really know what's going on. What type of trainings they might need, certifications, et cetera. So you really, during the design process, have the opportunity to say, okay, everybody's going to be eligible, but everyone also has to have been here for 2 years, have X certification, and maybe 2 positive performance reviews. You get to set this criteria up so that once the employee does become eligible based on that criteria, you have a better faith in their ability to steward the company. So that's how you would kind of gradually get people involved over time. You would have criteria set in such a way that at the date of transition, maybe 50% of employees are eligible and they're your founding membership. And then over time, any new hires or any folks that haven't met that threshold could gradually come into the membership. And pros and cons, it is a balance when you think about how much membership you want. In general, we think that more is better. It's not always the case. Like, you don't want to open up membership to people who aren't ready. And so again, that's where that criteria comes into play. At the same time, you want to foster excitement for this idea. If you're creating new business structure, getting people fired up about it, and then saying, well, 90% of you aren't eligible, that might put a bad taste in people's mouths and make it more difficult to recruit members later on down the line. It might make stewarding the company more difficult. The people in charge of a worker-owned cooperative from a governance perspective is the board, and that's comprised of the worker owners. So, we want a strong pool of people. We don't want 2 people to be on a board. We want more than that generally. I'm speaking in generalization. So if we have more specific questions, definitely jump on a call and talk about your company's unique situation. But it's a balance. You set a criteria for what you'd like to see, and then you figure out that balance.
Fantastic. Thank you, Courtney. Well, that's all the questions that we have. Annie, Courtney, we're just so grateful for your time and your expertise. Like I mentioned before, we've recorded the session. We'll be sending it out to everyone here and everyone who registered and posting it on the Local First Arizona website for you to access afterwards. And then we'll also send out the contact information for Project Equity in case your business is interested in having a conversation and potentially pursuing the opportunity. And if you need anything from us at Local First, any other questions for your business, anything like that, feel free to reach out. But we'll go ahead and close things off for today. Again, Annie and Courtney, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you all. It was a pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much.